A popular topic that has been sent in a number of times in the last week has been The Undertaker's comments about Montreal. Let me ask you this and see what you think. I'll choose one of these emails. This one was sent in by Jake from Wise, Virginia.
Oh, I thought he was from State Farm.
To cornydrive@gmail.com. I know the Montreal Screwjob has been debated to death, but The Undertaker recently did an interview at ESPN and said something I've always wondered about, but don't recall ever hearing anyone else discuss. In the interview, Undertaker suggests that he could have stepped up to win the title from Bret Hart prior to Bret's departure from WCW, thus avoiding the whole Montreal incident. The quote, "You should have put me in the match somehow with Bret. I'm sure Bret would have dropped it to me. I could have dropped it to Shawn later on, right after that. There was a different way to do it." My question is, does Jim recall if the creative team ever discussed putting the WWF title back on The Undertaker as a way to transition it between Bret and Shawn Michaels? If not, how come? It may not have been exactly what Vince McMahon wanted from a creative standpoint, but it does seem like The Undertaker could have helped resolve the difficult situation in a manner that was acceptable for everyone involved.
Well, it would have been acceptable for Bret, but Bret wasn't everyone involved. The reason why it was never discussed was because between Vince and Shawn, Vince was determined that this was going to go somehow like he wanted it to go. And he thought, because he always had, that he could work it out. Because I don't remember anything that he ever before really of that level couldn't get worked out. Because Vince is great at talking people into things. Shawn wanted to get it. Shawn would have been miffed if that had been discussed. Shawn would have put up the biggest fucking stink. Because, yes, if Vince had gone to Bret and said, okay, drop it to fucking Taker, and then in 6 months we'll have Taker drop it to Shawn or whatever the fuck, I'm sure Bret would have gone for that, and Shawn would have been fucking bullshit. And he would have bitched and griped and complained and done whatever the fuck, and then you'd have been right back where you started from. Also, Vince, before Bret left, Vince wanted his guy that he had picked to get the win over Bret. These things were still important back in those days. We wouldn't still be talking about this 20 years later if it wasn't important. And then it was a competition amongst nobody who was going to give up anything to get their way. And it wasn't going to work out. So, yes, Bret would have probably dropped it to fucking Taker, but then Shawn would have been bullshit, and Vince wouldn't have got Bret to put his fucking chosen guy over and wouldn't have put the match in the ring and delivered what he'd promised and blah, blah, blah. So it would have still been a big fiasco. Just different people would have been complaining. I mean, do you see that any differently, Brian? That it would have just been different people complaining about something different.
I think the core problem was always that Vince wanted Shawn to beat Bret, and Shawn was impossible to deal with, but Vince had just nothing but leniency with Shawn Michaels. That's the problem. It would have been interesting if Undertaker did step up, because obviously, and we've seen it in the documentary on the WWE Network, Undertaker has a very different relationship with Vince McMahon. I don't know where it was in 1997 compared to where it is now, but that would have been interesting if he stepped up and got involved. I mean, there was always those stories that at WrestleMania 14, he was taping his fists up if Shawn Michaels decided he wasn't going to do business with Steve Austin. Undertaker was going to get involved. So, I mean, it would have been
he was sitting right at gorilla position, watching the monitor, and in the Garden, everybody, was that the Garden, or that was Boston?
It was Boston.
Well, the point is, it was the Boston Garden. No, everybody had to come right past that area. So one way, either a new champion properly was coming back or Shawn Michaels was coming back. But one way or another, he was going to see what happened. But anyway, yeah. Well, and that's, you're right with Taker's relationship with Vince. Maybe Taker could have even talked Vince into it. But then Shawn would have been even more bullshit. And as that incident shows Shawn and Taker didn't have a, relationship where Taker or Shawn was just going to do things that Taker said to do. So, and then
but he wasn't the champion yet. I mean, that's the whole point. You're putting the belt on him. You're not trying to get the belt off him. So Shawn doesn't want to do the match. You put Undertaker in the match with Bret.
Shawn wanted to win the fucking match.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, you don't have to worry about what he thinks. Okay, you're not getting the match with Bret. He doesn't want to do business then. Okay, goodbye. You're not the champion.
Oh, then Shawn would have gone ballistic. I'm not saying Shawn would have been gone by then if it had been up to me to begin with. Shawn Michaels would have not still been in the WWF after all the other shit he'd done if it had been up to me. But he would have gone ballistic if he wasn't getting that fucking belt. But then he wasn't even. Remember, he didn't even when confronted and asked. I swear to God, I didn't know anything about this. Yes, he knew. He since admitted he knew. Nobody ever goddamn came in front of me and said, "Hey," or I would have had to tell him. I just kept my head down. But no, he lied and said, "I didn't know anything about this. I didn't have anything to do with it." And he did. Shawn just wanted the fucking belt because it was for Shawn. Did I mention it was for Shawn? And Shawn's all Shawn cared about at that point in his life.
The other thing, if Montreal hadn't happened the way it did, everyone always looks at what would have happened with the Mr. McMahon character. There have been various things done on TV before that where Vince was getting more involved. Vince was getting more vocal. There was an incident where Bret and him started fighting over by the announce table. Bret shoved him down in the ring after the cage match one time on Raw. Were there any talks about Vince doing more as a character, as a heel character before Montreal? Was it all purely based on the finish to Montreal?
No, he didn't realize. He didn't realize until a week or two after Montreal that he was going to be the heel. Remember, he was still trying to babyface. Well, Bret refused to do the time-honored tradition and all that stuff, and being the put-upon owner for the first, week or 10 days or whatever on the first couple of shows, until it was just like, well, what the fuck? And at the time, I was like, what the fuck? It didn't make any sense to me. I said, you're trying to not only babyface with the people, you're telling them that your business is fake. You're telling them that Bret didn't want to do the job, which they're going to respond positively to, since that's like a fighter taking a dive in those days. Yeah, Bret Hart wouldn't fucking go down on purpose and take a dive for Vince McMahon. He's the guy. That's the response that it got. So he went out and told people that Bret wouldn't take a fucking dive, which got Bret over as an even more sympathetic figure. And he was trying to tell people that it's just what you do in wrestling. So he exposed the whole business and was trying to be the responsible owner that was bringing you your wrestling and these uncooperative wrestlers, blah, 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 until everybody just shit on that. And then he became Mr. McMahon because he had to go with it. He wasn't going to be a heel. The fighting with Bret was because he wanted to show conflict with he and Bret. He was setting up. They'd already started talking about, that he was going to let Bret out of his contract and let him go to WCW. So there'd be personal animosity between him and Bret's getting out of control or whatever. That fit, but it didn't make Vince a heel in his mind. But then, obviously, after everybody universally shit on Vince for fucking Bret, he became Mr. McMahon, the evil owner. But he didn't think that he was going to be the evil owner. He thought he was just going to be the owner.
What did you observe when you were there back then with the relationship with Vince McMahon and The Undertaker? What was it like in 1997, 1996, 1998?
I never saw them have a crossword. I mean, if they had a talk in private without any of us there over something in creative, they may have disagreed or whatever. But no, I never heard Vince say a bad word about him in any meeting, whether he was there or not. Never heard him say anything behind his back. He loved Taker and loved the gimmick and always intended to feature him as prominently as possible. The only... he viewed Taker kind of like Andre, and that Taker never had the belt for any long period of time. They did those couple of short little things, or I don't know how many times they did it after I stopped paying attention in the 2000s, but he had the belt a couple of times for short periods because you had to pull that trigger he couldn't be the guy that never won the title, but he didn't need the title. He was like Andre. He was bigger in some cases than the belt. So he won it a couple of times, but didn't have to have a long run, because that way you've got a world champion and you've got a guy that's as big a draw as a world champion. And the only reason he put it on Taker, and then, you know, he knew that he could get a job out of Taker and that it wouldn't kill Taker, and that Taker would do it the right way. But you didn't get too many jobs out of Taker, or it would have been bad for business. He would have done them, but it wouldn't have made sense for business. But you could put a belt on him because you could get it off of him. He wasn't Andre like in that, you know, it wouldn't care. Well, with fucking, you know, the finish of Bad Blood. There, you know, Undertaker did a job, but obviously nobody considered that he got beat, which is what we were supposed to do. Figure out a way to beat Taker without people figuring he got beat.
I know you got out of there as fast as you could, but isn't the story that when Vince went to get knocked out by Bret Hart, it was Undertaker that kind of insisted that he goes over there, that he owed it to Bret to go to him?
Yeah, he was like, you need to go fucking face up to him. Okay, but I thought it was... I'm glad I didn't stay around, but I wish I'd have seen this. I'd just love to, knowing the personalities involved, to see Vince sit down, see Bret in the shower, like, if you're still out there, when I come out, I'm going to knock you out. And Vince just sit down and like, all right. You know, it was, if you know those individuals, that would have been great to fucking watch, because it was completely in character for everybody.